it took me years in therapy before I could begin to talk about what happened to me in prison.
Well, let's start now.
Trust me, with my family, I got a lifetime of material to work with there before I even got to prison. In a lot of ways, I've been trying to escape from prison for 30 years.
Let's start now.
As much as I'd like to present myself to you as this altruistic, wonderful, person who volunteers and does things, it's really, a lot of the stuff that I've done has been an act of survival. I'm just trying to stay alive and stay a step ahead of my depression. I was talking about different therapies. I've done talk therapy, I've done psychoanalysis, I've done psychodrama, I did EST. Remember EST from the 70s, some of you? It's called the Forum. It's anything I could do. I did EMDR, which is stuff that's, they work with 9/11 firefighters, and that they did EMDR, and Vietnam vets. It's been very effective in addressing post-traumatic stress disorder. I spoke to this group of therapists, and I said, my house probably employs more therapists than any other house on the Eastern Seaboard. I have a therapist, my partner has a therapist, our daughter has a therapist, we have a family therapist, we've gone to couples counseling. When our dog started to chew and somebody suggested a behaviorist, that's where I drew the line. I said, no, that's just, too much. But I'm, a lot of what, I've been trying to do is just, survive, And as at least my workaholism, had some nice tangible rewards. But it was like, it also became apparent to me that the stakes are kind of high now, I've got to protect, what I'm acquiring. So it was like, part of it was not out of any real need to just be a better person. It probably had more to do with just, trying not to implode and to sabotage myself. And now the people in my life who were depending on me. The shame and the humiliation around sexual violence is horrendous. It goes beyond the physical. I mean, the physical rape itself was awful for me. But I think the psychological trauma of having to make those painful compromises just to get through my sentence for the next, I was in there from 17 to 21. They were pretty formative years. It's late adolescence. It's at a time when, most kids are dealing with issues of identity and sexuality. And in a world where there are very distorted notions of what manhood and masculinity is. As you all know from working there, the whole value system is inverted. So the more treacherous someone is, the higher esteem they have. The prison grapevine is pretty efficient. The afternoon after I was raped, everybody in that prison knew what happened to me. So I couldn't even suffer my humiliation in private. And I blame myself. I could hear my stepmother's voice in my head saying, "You made your bed, now lie in it." It was my stupid choices that landed me in prison. I deserved to be punished. I may have even deserved to go to prison. But I didn't deserve what I got. But, as a young kid who, experienced this, and then, in the context of the way that the culture is within prison, in a lot of ways I thought it was my fault. And as I say, those notions of masculinity and manhood in prison reinforce that. I remember, an inmate saying, well, a real man would have never allowed that to happen to him. I don't care. He'd have killed everybody, but he wouldn't have let that happen. So if you let that happen, you weren't a real man anyway. I checked out to the extent that I was able to. And, as I said before, I tried to negotiate the system as best I could. The mind is a pretty complex and amazing organ in some ways. I don't think I would have It would have been too devastating, really, for me to have been able to take in fully my situation, how powerless I really was. So, you know, I adapted. But as you can imagine, it impacted my self-worth, no matter how much denial I may have had about it. You know, there were still those times when I was in my cell alone at night with no one else there, and I'd think about it, and then I'd, of course, quickly try to change the subject in my head if I could.
Oh, won't you come with me to a place where I am free? Oh, won't you come with me?
I was trying to deal with issues of my sexuality, you know, did this mean I wasn't a man anymore? You know, inmates view gay inmates as being fundamentally lacking in manhood in the first place. Because gay men like it, they're entitled to take it whenever they want. That's how they look at it. I had the privilege of going on a journey with some folks from Stop Prisoner Rape to South Africa, and we toured some prisons there, and we interviewed some inmates while we were there, and some inmates who had been victimizers as well as victims. And the most striking moment for me over there was when we were talking to an inmate who had been raped and bravely came forward and told on his attackers, and he was now spending out the rest of his term in solitary. And I asked him, well, how is it for gay prisoners? And he says, well, that's very different. I says, how's that different? He says, well, they like it. This coming from someone who had been raped. I still have a hard time understanding that.
Let's make some noise, don't you wanna live? Well, let's start now.
Writing Fish was the ultimate act of trying to let go. You know, it's, in a lot of ways, it was like therapy on steroids. You know, in therapy, I can talk around an issue for years, you know, maybe touch on it and then back off and not bring it up again. But in writing, I had to go back there, and I had to re-experience, and I had to report from those places in a way that I wasn't capable of doing it back then. I just, you know, I was a kid. I didn't have the life experience. I didn't have the insight, but it's amazing to me how much I remembered. And somebody asked me once, how could you remember so much detail? Given those details, how could you ever forget them? Believe me, I've been trying to forget them for 30 years.
Make some noise, don't you wanna live? Well, let's start now. Last call, everybody get down. Come on, let's raise the roof now. Let's make some noise, don't turn the music down. No. Last call, everybody get down. Come on, let's raise the roof now. Let's make some noise, don't you wanna live? Well, let's start now. Last call, everybody start down. Come on, let's start now. Let's make some noise, don't let's start now. Let's start now. Last call, let's start now. Let's start now. Let's start now. Let's start now. Let's start now.